They hurt people and feel absolutely nothing. Most dangerous personalities do not look dangerous. They look calm, confident, normal, and some people can destroy others without feeling guilt at all. The terrifying part is that many of them are socially successful. There is someone in your life, or there has been, who did something that should have destroyed them with guilt, betrayed a friend, hurt someone vulnerable, lied with devastating consequences, and then, days later, maybe hours later, they were completely fine, laughing, moving on, sleeping perfectly. You watched this and felt something you couldn't quite name. Not just anger, something closer to vertigo, because the absence of guilt where guilt should have been felt like a violation of a fundamental law. The way it would feel to watch something fall upward. We are wired to expect guilt. It is one of the oldest and most universal human emotions, documented across every culture, every civilization, every era of recorded history. Guilt is the internal signal that tells us we have violated our own moral code. It is what makes social life possible. Without it, cooperation collapses, trust becomes impossible, and relationships become purely transactional calculations of personal advantage. Some people do not have this signal, not weakened, absent. And according to research, there are far more of them than most people realize. The condition is called psychopathy, or in clinical diagnostic language, antisocial personality disorder, though researchers make important distinctions between the two. It is not what movies have taught you. The vast majority of psychopaths are not violent. They are not in prisons. They are in offices, in relationships, in families, in positions of power and influence, functioning at a high level, often extremely successfully in the ordinary world. Dr. Robert Hare, the psychologist who developed the most widely used clinical assessment for psychopathy, the Hare Psychopathy Checklist, estimates that approximately 1% of the general population meets the clinical criteria for psychopathy. That sounds small. It is not. In a country of 330 million people, that is 3.3 million individuals. In your city, your workplace, your social circle, statistically, they are present. And in certain environments, that percentage rises dramatically. A 2010 study published in the Journal of Business Ethics found psychopathic traits in approximately 4% of corporate executives, 4 times the general population rate. Other studies examining high-level leadership positions have found rates as high as 12 to 21% depending on methodology and sector. The person without guilt is not rare. They are, as the title says, everywhere. And understanding exactly what they are, neurologically, psychologically, behaviorally, is one of the most practically important things you can learn. Guilt is not simply a thought or a decision. It is a neurobiological event, a specific pattern of activation across interconnected brain regions that produces the subjective experience of moral distress. Understanding what guilt looks like in the brain makes it possible to understand, with precision, what is absent in the psychopathic brain. When most people do something that harms another person, a predictable neural sequence unfolds. The anterior cingulate cortex detects the conflict between the action taken and the internal moral code. The insula generates the visceral, bodily discomfort associated with guilt, the sick feeling, the chest tightness, the inability to be fully present in other activities. The ventromedial prefrontal cortex integrates this emotional signal with reasoning about consequences in relationships. Together, these regions produce the experience of guilt, uncomfortable enough to motivate repair, to drive apology, to change future behavior. In psychopathic individuals, this sequence is fundamentally disrupted. Neuroimaging studies consistently show reduced volume and activity in the amygdala, the brain's emotional processing center, and reduced connectivity between the amygdala and the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. The emotional signal that should inform moral reasoning either does not generate or does not transmit. A landmark 2013 study by neuroscientist Dustin Pardini at the University of Pittsburgh followed 56 men over 20 years and found that those with higher psychopathic traits showed measurably smaller amygdala volume, and that this reduction predicted persistent antisocial behavior independent of any environmental factors. This is not a character flaw in the ordinary sense. It is a neurological architecture that processes the social and moral world fundamentally differently. Dr. James Fallon, a neuroscientist at UC Irvine who discovered his own psychopathic brain scan during research, describes the psychopathic brain as one that processes other people's emotions cognitively rather than affectively. They can understand intellectually that someone is in pain. They simply do not feel it. The emotional resonance that makes another person's suffering personally distressing, what neuroscientists call affective empathy, is either absent or severely reduced. What remains, and this is crucial, is cognitive empathy, the ability to accurately model what another person is thinking and feeling. In high-functioning psychopaths, this capacity is often exceptional. They are skilled readers of emotional states, not because they share those states, but because reading them accurately is useful. A predator needs to understand its environment. The psychopathic individual uses cognitive empathy the way a chess player uses an understanding of their opponent's strategy, as information, not as shared experience. This combination, absent affective empathy, intact or superior cognitive empathy, is what makes high-functioning psychopaths so difficult to identify and so effective at manipulation. They understand your emotions better than most people do. They simply do not care about them in the way you assume everyone does. Because the clinical picture of psychopathy rarely matches the Hollywood version, most people encounter psychopathic individuals repeatedly without recognizing them. Understanding the actual behavioral signature, what researchers observe in real environments, not in prison intake assessments, is essential. Charm that feels slightly too calibrated. High-functioning psychopaths are frequently described in initial encounters as extraordinarily charismatic. They are attentive, engaging, interested in you specifically. They remember details. They say the right thing with unusual consistency. But people who later reflect on these encounters often describe a quality that was hard to name at the time. A sense that the charm was performed rather than felt. That the warmth was precise in a way that warmth usually isn't. Dr. Hare calls this the mask of sanity. Borrowing a term from psychiatrist Hervey Cleckley's foundational 1941 work, the seamless social presentation that conceals the absence beneath it. Behavior that doesn't match the stated emotion. One of the most reliable behavioral markers is a disconnect between expressed emotion and action. A psychopathic individual will express deep remorse for something they did, convincingly, with appropriate vocal tone and facial expression, and then repeat the same behavior within days. They will tell you they love you, and simultaneously be systematically deceiving you. They will cry at a funeral and feel nothing. The expression of emotion is learned and deployed strategically. It is not generated by the underlying experience that would produce it in others. A relationship history full of wreckage and explanations. Because psychopathic individuals process relationships as resources rather than connections, their histories tend to involve significant damage to other people. Former partners described as crazy, friendships that ended badly, professional relationships characterized by conflict and betrayal. What is distinctive is the narrative architecture around this history. Every damaged relationship has a clear explanation, and in every explanation, the psychopathic individual is either the victim or the reasonable party. The pattern of wreckage is always someone else's fault, consistently across years and relationships. The absence of the normal breaks. In ordinary social interaction, there are countless small inhibitions. Things most people don't say because they sense it would be hurtful. Don't do because they feel the weight of social consequences. Don't pursue because something in them registers it as wrong. Psychopathic individuals frequently lack these inhibitions in ways that, in retrospect, become visible. They will say something cutting with a smile. They will cross a boundary and show no awareness that a boundary existed. They will take something that is not theirs, materially, emotionally, professionally, with a matter-of-factness that confuses the people around them. Not because they are unaware of the rules, because the rules to them are simply descriptions of what other people do, not constraints they feel internally. Understanding psychopathy carries a real risk. It can make you suspicious of everyone. Charm becomes suspect. Confidence becomes a warning sign. Every smooth, successful person in your life becomes a potential candidate. This is the wrong response, and psychologically, it is its own kind of damage. The research offers something more useful than paranoia. Specific, evidence-based calibration tools that protect you without making you afraid of human connection. Watch behavior across time, not first impressions. The psychopathic presentation is most effective in early, low-stakes interactions. It is maintained through careful calibration of information, what they reveal, when, to whom. Over time and across context, the mask develops inconsistencies. The remorse that never produces change. The empathy that evaporates when it becomes costly. The story that shifts depending on the audience. Dr. Hare's clinical advice, distilled for everyday use. Give relationships time before extending significant trust. Not suspicion, patience. Let the pattern reveal itself. Pay attention to how they talk about other people. One of the most reliable non-clinical indicators of psychopathic traits is the characteristic way high-functioning psychopaths discuss other people, particularly people they have wronged or who have left their lives. The absence of genuine accountability. The consistent positioning of themselves as reasonable and others as unreasonable. The descriptions of others' emotions as overreactions or manipulations. You learn an enormous amount about someone by listening carefully to how they narrate their relationships. Not what they say about you, but what they say about everyone else. Trust your nervous system and investigate the discomfort. Many people who have been significantly harmed by psychopathic individuals report, in retrospect, an early sense of unease they could not articulate. Something slightly off. A moment where the response didn't match the situation. A feeling of being seen in a way that felt more like being assessed than understood. These signals are worth taking seriously, not as proof of anything, but as prompts for closer attention. The cognitive empathy of a skilled psychopath is real, and one of its effects is a subtle sense, in perceptive people, of being read rather than met. Understand what you cannot fix. This may be the most important point of all, and the research on it is unambiguous. Core psychopathic traits, the neurological architecture, the absence of effective empathy, the fundamental inability to experience guilt, do not respond to love, patience, confrontation, ultimatums, or therapy in the way that ordinary emotional difficulties do. Studies of therapeutic interventions with psychopathic individuals have found not merely low effectiveness, but in some cases, negative effectiveness. Therapy providing psychopathic individuals with additional tools for more sophisticated manipulation. This is not a counsel of despair. It is a counsel of accuracy. The person without guilt is not someone who has not yet found the right motivation to change. They are someone whose brain does not generate the signal that drives change in most people. Recognizing this, clearly without the softening that hope and love naturally produce, is the beginning of protecting yourself effectively. 1% of the population, everywhere, in every workplace, every family, every social circle, every level of power. Not monsters, people. people with a specific neurological profile that makes the moral world work differently for them than it does for you. Knowing that is not paranoia. It is one of the most useful things you can understand about the world you actually live in. Most dangerous personalities do not look dangerous. They look calm, confident, normal, and some people can destroy others without feeling guilt at all.